The amount of energy available to man controls his progress. Throughout history, he has used fire, electricity, and even the atom. But these sources eventually will end. One unlimited source has always been available. That source is the sun. These people are inventing and developing the most efficient devices ever built for producing solar power. Mr. Calvin D. MacCracken is president of Jet Heat Incorporated and is currently working on a device to produce mechanical energy directly from the sun's rays. Dr. Peter E. Glaser of Arthur D. Little Incorporated has built a solar furnace which produces temperatures high enough to melt asbestos, and he's actually doing high-temperature research. Today, these scientists are discussing the problems of solar power with your host on 2000 AD, Professor Jonathan Karras of the University of New Hampshire.
Up into a number of groups, and we know that you can convert solar energy to thermal, and that one of the groups we mentioned, chemical, electrical, and also your comments, or Dr. Glaser, that low and high temperatures are
indeed
important.
High temperature. And
here's sort of a model, I guess, showing an application of solar energy into the conversion into electricity. And Dr. Glaser, if you would be the backstop there, maybe we can actually get the little automobile to operate here by solar energy. This is the model that was sent to us by General Motors, but it indicates some advanced thinking. Now, how practical is this device, do you think?
Well, I don't believe that we're ready to do anything like this now. It would take some real invention in the future.
Because of the amount of area involved?
The collecting area is still too small. We only get 1 horsepower per square yard of energy from the sun, and it certainly would not be enough at present to run our car.
Well, why don't we take a look at some of these solar cells? I got a number of samples here from Hoffman Electronics, and it's interesting what they have been able to do with them. They are quite small and still quite efficient. Here are a number of them in various stages of assembly, etc. And take a good look at those. Now, the efficiency of these is does have a certain maximum, doesn't it, Dr. Glaser?
Yes, it is about 12%, and actually the development of these cells culminates a long study and research. At first they tried just using the electric energy developed by dissimilar metals, and then went on to the effect of batteries as light shines on them.
Here's a multiple unit. Obviously, the more elements, the higher output you can get, and of course here's really a small individual one. Now, I think it's important here, isn't it, gentlemen, to point out that this is different from a regular photoelectric cell, which a person may have in an exposure meter, because it's only about 1% efficient, I understand.
Yes, the material of these cells which you have there is silicon, while the photocell is selenium usually.
Now, here's another quite futuristic application. If we could have some artificial sun on here, perhaps we can, any possibilities there. Now, there's an interesting application, because this is a model airplane, of course, powered by solar energy. It is nothing more than an application of 4 small motors being powered by the light which is falling on the cells, which in fact are on the wing surfaces, and you can see that it's quite easy to stop the airplane. In fact, I can show a little bit about where those cells are. You can get a look at the surfaces there. You can see there are actual cells there, and of course as I move them out of the range of light, it does tend to slow them down. In fact, here's another application. How practical do you think these are, gentlemen?
Well, I think there's the same limitation with these solar cells as we mentioned in the car, that we have to have a very large area to catch the diffuse energy which the sun brings to the Earth.
Mm-hmm. But here's a motorboat and an airplane, and of course, I don't know by the year 2000 AD, but we'll have to make, in other words, some remarkable advances before this really becomes totally practical.
Yes, the cost of producing electric power by this method is fantastically high right now, but perhaps it'll come down in 20 years.
Here's an interesting application also. It's a small portable radio powered by solar energy. I cover my hands over the cells. Now it is powered by solar energy. The light falling on the cells actually is converted to electricity at an efficiency of about 12 or so %. So therefore you have here a radio, a source of power from light. And it is important, I think, to keep in mind that this is a lot more efficient than the average photoelectric cell, which we know is part of an exposure meter, where the efficiency may only be a fraction of a % or so. Now, you, Mr. MacCracken, have been primarily concerned with the transformation of light into mechanical energy. First, let's talk about this Bell application, which is something I neglected. We brought a film along of the first installation of a solar installation to produce power for a telephone call, and I suppose we can get this film and see how this was applied. There is the system there. What can we say about this as a realistic idea?
Well, the purpose is to charge the batteries on these long-distance lines.
Mm-hmm.
And in this manner, you've got a practical application. It doesn't matter the fact that the cells are rather expensive.
But the price is going down all the time.
Yes, it is.
I think that is an important thing.
$3. I think the main use for these kind of cells is in areas where it is inconvenient for other people to come and service them, where you do not want to have a generator powered by, let's say, a gasoline or diesel motor.
Now here's a storage device they use. I guess it stores up energy for cloudy days. System of a storage battery. And this is the film of the first call ever made. In fact, I think the gentleman is in this that had the privilege of making that first call. It was done in Americus, Georgia. And we're getting places, obviously, with the conversion of sunlight into actual...
You said he was a
energy.
peanut farmer, is that
Yes,
right?
yes, that's right. Well, now, you have a very interesting device here, Mr. MacCracken. First of all, how long have you been working on the problem of converting solar energy into mechanical energy?
We've been working on this since 1950, and this model here is simply a glass demonstration of the principle involved. This light here represents the sun shining its light and heat to the earth. This is a solar collector, which converts the light into heat, boils the water, and pumps it out through this tube and up through this valve at this point. After that, the liquid goes over through here and goes through the turbine here, which spins this disc.
Now, let me take a better look at that jet. I think that's the interesting part of it. It's really a device for producing mechanical energy directly from radiant energy. And I think you can see the jet of fluid there. What fluid is used in this?
Well, this is for water, or can use alcohol or freon, almost any fluid that you wish. Actually, this demonstrates a pump as well. We think pumping is perhaps the most near to actual economic use of any solar energy application.
In other words, there's a dying need, a great need for pumping operation?
Yes, there certainly is. Now, as you know, this is just a Rube Goldberg model here to prove a principle. In actual use, you would have a solar collector, which would be a black plate. This is for low temperature applications, and the sun would come through a pane of glass that would cover a black plate. You would have water going through little tubes connected to this plate, which would be heated up, and then that hot water would go over to operate the pump or the power unit or whatever it might be.
What do you intend to do now that you have, shall we say, the prototype model of this pump built? What is your next move?
Well, we are building full-scale models for use in pumping water out of wells by use of solar energy, and we hope that it won't be too long before they're in production and ready to sell. They're more or less in competition with windmills, for instance, the old windmill idea.
I gather you won't make them of glass, though.
No, they'll be metal steel tanks. Actually, this will look just like a steel tank. We'll have the collector, which will be the most visible thing, which will be maybe 10 feet high and 4 feet wide with a glass panel covering it. Or it might be a plastic panel. There are many types of plastics that are coming along to replace the glass that aren't breakable like glass.
Your comment on this windmill is interesting. Of course, with any solar-powered motor appliance, we have the problem that the sun does not shine for every day and all day. Therefore, one of the great problems we have to overcome is to find means for heat storage of solar energy, and this is perhaps from a research point of view one of the most challenging ones.
It's also true that we can only get, what, approximately a horsepower per square yard, period, and that's it.
Yes.
Or even less than that, actually. That's about theoretical.
Yes.
I think there's a misconception that we magnify things here, which we do not do.
Well, we certainly cannot. The sun sends us a certain portion of its energy, and we can only accept about half of what we can get if we would come closer to the sun. We then don't have perfect absorbers, because even that black sheet which you had shown to us cannot absorb all the energy, and one of the problems is to actually develop a perfect absorber.
It works about 50% efficient. It loses about half of its heat, actually.
But there is an upper maximum, and
Yes.
I think this may be a misconception in some people's minds.
Well, quite a few of these things have actually been built, and they are in use in arid countries, for example in Israel, and I believe also...
Now, we were talking about a number of things here, and one of them that we mentioned earlier is the low temperature idea. What other devices here depend on the low temperatures available from solar energy?
Well, let me answer that by saying that what is needed in the solar energy field is a Henry Ford to come along and mass produce at low cost these vast areas of solar collectors that are required to make it possible. See, solar energy, by definition, is a diffuse energy. It's come a long way. And also in areas where you have a lot of solar energy, you've got dry climates. It's an arid climate. So first of all, you need water, and pumping of water we saw here. A second thing would be purifying the water. Then also you have a hot climate there, and you need air conditioning, or you could use water heating. And all of those are possible. Heating of homes and power production are also possibilities.
Perhaps one of the youngsters watching today might be this Henry Ford we're looking for.
So he certainly has a wide field for his application there.
Good. Now, I read quite a bit about a solar still. In fact, I brought along an example here of some work that has been done on a solar still. And I wonder if we could take a look at this and see what comments you have about the idea of distilling or purifying water. What would you say about this, Mr. MacCracken?
Well, these are quite possible. They're working today. They're going to be tested in quantities very soon. This still works by having the salt or brackish water come in through the top. The tube at the top comes down, and it soaks up inside. The heat of the sun comes in and evaporates, vaporizes the water, and then you have a relatively cold cover plate, the glass plate on the front. The water, pure water, condenses on that and runs down into the bucket, and the salt water goes out another place. So this really works, purifying water by solar energy.
In fact, we have a sketch here which perhaps may make your explanation a little bit clearer. There it is, showing how the solar energy comes in and the pure water does go off at the side.
Yes, that's right.
Well, now, here is a large, shall we say, a representation. In fact, this is from Scientific American. What are the advantages of a, shall we say, a king-size installation such as this?
Well, as I said, it's a diffuse energy, and you need a lot of area to produce the water. It's a free fuel. Solar energy is free. It doesn't cost you anything except the cost of putting in the original equipment. And you can see that there's a lot of equipment here in this slide that has to be put in. But once you have it there, you're going to get a lot of water for nothing.
Now,
we do believe, though, that this is a very possible thing to be done. In fact, the U.S. Department of Interior has greatly encouraged research in these areas.
Now, there is a solar still of sorts. Mr. MacCracken, what can you tell us about that particular one, which certainly looks a little bit odd?
Well, this was used on life rafts during the war, and the salt water is put in at the top and goes in and soaks up a black member on the inside. The sun comes through the plastic material here and heats that salty water. Again, the vapor comes out, condenses on the outside, runs down around and comes out of this tube. Actually, this still comes packed in a little can like this so that the man on the life raft can have it in a compact place and can get a drink of water out of this tube.
That's certainly a very interesting and life-saving application, I would say.
Yes, it is.
Well, now, those are the low-temperature ideas. Dr. Glaser, you're primarily interested in high-temperature applications for research, and we have here in fact, a photograph of your own solar furnace that you're building in Cambridge, I believe.
Yes, we at Arthur D. Little have designed and built a solar furnace for use in high-temperature research. It is a very convenient means for generating high temperatures in the laboratory.
Well, let's take a look at the operation of this, and perhaps you can tell us a little bit about it, since you were instrumental in building it, and we can describe some of its characteristics there.
This is a view of the solar furnace as it is brought into position to track the sun. It has to face the sun in order that the rays are concentrated by the parabolic mirror which you see there. The mirror is 5 foot in diameter. The sample is contained in a sample holder which is shown in this picture here. The sample can be moved along the 3 directions of the coordinate axes so that we can have any part of the sample exposed to the very hot rays of the sun.
About what temperatures can you produce with this particular
We have
furnace?
obtained in Cambridge 3100 degrees C. Some even better ones, perhaps located in Arizona, could go up to 4000 degrees C. These are some of the motors which move the sample moving mechanism and allow various motions of the sample holder. This is a sample actually held in there and shown after exposure.
But there is an upper limit now to the temperatures that you can reach by such a furnace, irrespective of its large
Yes, indeed.
size.
The surface of the sun is 6000 degrees Kelvin, and we cannot get anywhere as high because of inefficiencies and absorption through atmosphere.
No matter how big the mirror is.
Even if we increase the mirror, we still cannot circumvent the second law of thermodynamics. This
Now, what
is
is
a
this?
view of a sample being burned and heated up, and in just a little while you'll see the boiling liquid actually boiling in the sample. The sample is a very highly refractory brick, and this little area is liquid surrounded by solid material. Here you see what a sample like this is after it has been cooled. This is a heated area where the sample has been liquid. This is a sample of aluminum. Here a sample of stainless steel has been exposed to the hot rays, and here a silicon carbide. You see the temperature, it reaches 2700 degrees C, and only a time of 30 seconds was needed to expose it. With this sample of commercially available asbestos, the time was only 2 seconds, and we burned quite a hole inside it. This is a sample of zirconia, and this another sample of a highly refractory brick.
Well, now, can't we obtain, however, just as high temperatures with other furnaces that we do have available? I mean, what is the particular advantage of this one?
Well, it is nearly impossible to obtain radiation in the very pure heat form as we get it from the sun. We do not have to contend with contamination from furnace walls or chemicals in the furnace atmosphere.
Now, we've seen that there are a number of avenues of approach here on the utilization of solar energy. First of all, chemical, which we didn't deal on at all, but some time ago we did dwell on algae.
The growing of algae as a food, and thus having a means of changing the sun's energy in the type of energy which we either can use or burn as fuel.
And the electrical one is the electrical cells, which we've explained. Thermal, your pump, I think, is a good example.
Yeah, and then there's another type of chemical process in this heat storage, in this solar energy field, and that's storage of heat, which you mentioned before. You can store heat either in stones or in water, but we at Jet Heat have been doing quite a bit of work on chemical heat storage. Dr. Telkes is with us, and she started the idea at MIT on storing heat by the heat of fusion of chemicals.
Well, you do your work in Englewood, New Jersey. That's where your laboratories are.
That's right, and these byproducts of solar energy can be used in all kinds of fields like packaging and so forth to stabilize temperatures.
But there are a lot of avenues of research here, I think, important to us, in that youngsters who are young by definition now are getting into a field which is quite fascinating. Here you have something for nothing.
Well, the solar energy field has at the moment only its surface scratched as far as the practical application are concerned. We hope that in a way it will expand and that it will help us to tap the unlimited resources that perhaps thermonuclear reaction will one day hold for us.
In other words, you're trying to do research to see how you can contain high-temperature reactions is the reason for your particular building of the solar mirror.
Yes.
Whereas your particular interest, Mr. MacCracken, is to develop a pumping system or a system to get mechanical energy economically.
We're thinking more of the mass production applications of solar energy because, you see, solar energy doesn't have a weapon like atomic energy does, which is what really made atomic energy come of age.
$2 billion.
Yeah, more than that, I guess. Solar energy has got to be cheaper. It's got to be really competitive, and it's got to emphasize the free fuel before it can compete, you see.
Well, in our economy, I think it's the only sign is that if it's cheaper than other types of fuel, then it will be used. And it has to first become competitive before it will be successfully used in the heating of houses or even the cooling of houses. Or let's say today it's used in Florida to heat hot water for the home use.
Now, I wonder if either of you, I hope, would be willing to speculate a little bit about, a decade or 2 or 5 or 10 from now. Do you think we could power a spaceship using solar energy?
Well, once you get the spaceship out of the Earth's gravitational field and out into space, then it might be possible to get enough power to power the spaceship.
The fact there's a limitation of size, though.
Well, out in space, a limitation of size perhaps is not so important. We are today thinking of putting solar collecting mirrors up on a space platform and thus have energy available there to do whatever we want to do with it.
The possibilities, however, of taking an automobile, putting solar batteries over its surfaces and powering it are somewhat impractical then.
Well, at the moment it does seem to us that there's a definite limitation to that use.
You see, if you get 1 horsepower per square yard, theoretically, and you have maybe the most 10 square yards on the top of a car, it wouldn't be a very strong car. It's maybe 5 horsepower.
Well, here are some other ideas of what people are pursuing. Out in Natick, I guess, there is a planned development out there of a solar furnace. Is this particularly different from what you were doing,
Yes,
Dr. Glaser?
it isn't in principle. It is just a bit larger. Their idea is not to get very high temperatures, but to get a lot of energy. The Air Force is building a 100-foot solar furnace down in New Mexico, which will
100 feet?
100 feet in diameter, which will be a national research facility to look at some of the problems that we encounter, for example, when missiles hurl through space and re-enter our atmosphere.
The important thing here is even with a 100-foot mirror, we cannot get
No, we cannot
higher
exceed
temperatures.
the temperature of the sun unless the second law of thermodynamics is changed.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, in an application of this type here, which is an artist's conception of what's coming up in the future, there are attenuators, etc. I know
You
you
have been
nothing like
listening
this
to
in your
Dr.
particular
Peter
one.
Glaser and Mr. Calvin MacCracken discussing the future of solar power with Professor Jonathan Karras of the University of New Hampshire.